Awesome.
Welcome back to Far From Perfect, everyone. We have a repeat guest today because everyone loved her so much on the last episode that we did. Miss Lotty Roberts is back, and we are going to be talking about feelings today. So, Lottie is a mindfulness teacher and an emotional intelligence specialist, and she's currently writing a book. So, hopefully, we can talk a little bit about that today, also, Lottie. Thank you for coming back to the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here. And just the opportunity to talk to you, Kylie, is always a bonus. So that's bringing me a lot of joy.
Yes, I love connecting. I love connecting with you. So, thanks for coming today.
Thanks for having me.
So, talking about feelings, I think it's so interesting. When you ask somebody how they are, how are you feeling, how are you doing? A lot of people don't know what to say. Mad, sad, happy. Those are like the three that I am most familiar with.
Mhm.
Um, so can you talk about what are feelings and why it's important to understand what they are?
Yeah, sure. Um, what I'll do is I'll give a distinction between feelings and emotions because they actually get used interchangeably. I always think it's funny when people call me an emotional intelligent expert because that's probably not what I would have been called as a child or even a young adult. And I'm still working at it now, but I do know a lot about emotions. But I wouldn't say, my disclaimer is I'm not always emotionally intelligent. I'm just more emotionally intelligent than I used to be. So going back to your question around what are feelings, and then I'll add in what are emotions and the difference between those. And then why is it important to look at those? So an emotion, it's almost like, because emotion is energy in motion, right? It's where the word comes from, energy in motion. And possibly what you know as an emotion is almost like the motion before the emotion, because I think, again, as I'll talk about feelings in terms of how that's different. So it's basically like a whole body and mind response to a stimulus. Okay. That stimulus could be something in your external environment, but it could also just as easily be something like a thought in your head that comes up. That's also a stimulus. So I think it's really important to note that it's not necessarily that you see something or you're having a conversation or something happens that could stimulate something in terms of an emotion, but also just thinking a thought can stimulate it too. And so basically it's like your body is responding in some way. It's made your brain, and that's made some meaning to say it's either on a really base level, it's like a threat, move away, or something that's good, rewarding, move towards. And obviously underneath that, there are many different kind of, I guess, versions of that. So it could be fear, it could be anger. So it could be something that your needs are not being attended to, you're not being heard. So it could be anger that comes up. It could be a thought that's like worrying about a presentation you've got tomorrow that makes you anxious. So you see, these are all kind of stimulus.
Yeah.
But just that coming up, if you think of it, it's just there, okay? It needs to be known, okay? And actually knowing that you're feeling it. So it's like you've got the emotion is there, fear is there, but there's a lot of people that might ignore or not want to look at it. But feelings are you acknowledging that the emotion is there. So fear is there, and then you feel the fear. You go, this is fear. Fear is here. Yeah. So it's almost like the difference between the emotion is the noun, it's just there. The feeling is the verb. It's like you're actually acknowledging it, you're experiencing it, you're allowing yourself to experience it as well. Does that make sense in
It
terms
does.
of the difference?
Yeah.
Now, in terms of why it's actually really important for you to be able to kind of acknowledge your emotions, and I think actually the acknowledging of them then turns them into feelings, is these are important signals. Your body and your brain are giving you important signals. They're not there just randomly, they're there for a reason. Now, so if you're not actually acknowledging them and saying, what is it that's here? Where do I feel it? What do I notice? You can't process it. So it's like unfinished business. It's like under the surface. And we are in a world, unfortunately, I think it's changing, but we're in a world where we've been told it's not necessarily a good thing to feel our emotions. They get in the way of our relationships. They get in the way of our decisions. They get in the way of us being able to basically live our lives. That's what we've been told, but that's not necessarily the truth, because actually everything that comes up is coming up for a reason. So us actually feeling it gives us the opportunity to say, why might I be feeling anxious today? I'll pause a bit because I've said a lot, but does that make sense? Is there any kind of thoughts or questions from that?
No, I love that. I'm sure so many people listening to this have probably been told you're so emotional, either by a partner or a parent. I can think of like making decisions, like don't bring your emotions into it, make a list, pros and cons, make your decision from there. And, I've made some great decisions in my life, but I don't know if the best decisions were made by a pros and cons list or by an internal feeling.
Well, but maybe that's because how you've interpreted those, or so if we don't actually take that time to feel our emotions, so like I say, it's like you notice all of a sudden, it may be actually what you noticed to start with is, I don't know, there's like a tightness in your chest, or you're that in some way, like I don't know, there's a heaviness in your body. Something's there. You kind of feel like, as like I said, that motion before, that there's an energy shift. Just by taking the opportunity to feel it and go, a bit different today. What's that? What's going on? What if I was to say what emotion it was, because I'll come back to what you were saying about happy, sad, and mad. If I was to say, and there's so many emotions, what one is there? And then you start to understand what those emotions mean. Just that little exercise of pausing, looking to see what's there, and then looking to see what the intelligence is that is coming from that emotion, means that then you're using that emotion's intelligence rather than denying its intelligence and then having an impulsive reaction, which is not really, it's just, you just want that to go away. You're just not really digging into the intelligence. And just that inquiry, like a lot of research shows, one, it helps your resilience, but it also, that pause gives you pause to make a different choice. I talk about getting out of your lizard brain and going into your wizard brain.
Oh,
And
I love that.
Yeah.
Yes, of course, I'll see this with clients because they get so reactive. They're feeling something. And then of course the answer is fat loss. When it's that reaction, it's not a response. They're not tuning into why am I feeling this way? I'm sure there's a ton of other examples. Like, can you think of any other examples where people just like they feel something and they react instead of respond?
Oh, God, there's so many. But I mean, one that's personal to me, say, for example, you get maybe an email, like you're overwhelmed,
Yes.
you've got a lot going on, you're waiting for responses, you're kind of you're not really present, and your mind is like jumping around. You get an email that comes in, and it's maybe you're not reading it properly, possibly because you're not present, or it's pushing back on you, and you just want to go and then send it back.
Yeah.
Sometimes you do it, and then when you reread the email, you realize it actually doesn't say what you thought it said, that you reacted to and was triggered by. But in that moment, you're possibly not even triggered by that email. It's something else that's going on. So I think anything where you've got that really quick shifting reaction is almost like a prompt to pause. But like emails are one of the ones I would think. I think the other thing is it's very personal, your triggers to you. So it could be that, I don't know, if it is, say, for example, if your body image is something that you yourself feel very vulnerable about, any comment around that is going to be something that you're going to be hyper vigilant around, because it's an area of vulnerability. So I think really getting, self-awareness is just the most powerful gift and practice, because you start to form a relationship with yourself around what are these things that are touchy, hyper vigilant kind of topics, which we don't normally want to go into because they're a little bit raw. But if I can go into it in a safe way and find what's underneath that, then maybe my reaction will be different or my response will be different. We're trying to basically move from shoot from the hip reactions to more thoughtful responses. You know, that's what the pause and the gap can give you.
Well, and I had never thought about this. I mean, of course, I've heard the term emotional intelligence, but not in terms of using the emotions intelligence. So now I
Yeah.
want to be really aware of, okay, what am I feeling and what is that, or what's that emotion and what is it trying to teach me in this moment?
Yes.
Kind of excited to feel some
Yeah.
things.
And that's the thing that's really powerful when you look at it. I mean, we've talked, I think on your last podcast, we might have talked about the emotion of resentment, which actually is part of the envy family. And, you know, resentment, when you're feeling a lot of resentment, it's a real sign of unattended needs, because you're feeling resentful to whoever that person is. There's an unmet need underneath it that might not even be anything to do with that person that is triggering that resentful response. You know, for example, I don't know, seeing like your husband might come home, he might finish work at 5:30 and kind of like doesn't ever sort of work late, and you're working late, and you kind of feel resentful to your husband because they clock off at 5:30 and you're still there at like 7:30. But actually you've not maybe put a boundary in. It's not their fault. We could, you know, do you see what I mean? It's like, what do you need that you're not giving yourself or you're not asking that person for in terms of support? So there's intelligence underneath it. That's a big aha moment in and of itself.
Well, that's so funny because that was going to be my example too. My husband never listens to this podcast, so I can say it. Like last summer, I was getting really resentful towards him because he would go golfing during the workday.
Yeah.
And I was like, and so of course I worked through it in therapy and they had this discussion like, well, what am I actually wanting? What am I envious of? And I have total control over that, Lottie. If I wanted to go golfing every single day, I absolutely could. It's me not setting the boundary or taking the time, or it has nothing to do with poor Pat. Like he's just getting the end of it. Like he's just
Mm. Mm.
collateral damage.
Yeah. I always think if there's a question by a really good coach called Jerry Colonna, who you might have heard of. He wrote a really good book called Reboot. And I might have edited the question a bit. I'm maybe not remembering it verbatim, but it's like, how are you complicit in the conditions that you say you don't want?
Oh.
I'm like, there's nowhere to go with that one. You know, it's like, because it's how are you complicit, not someone else in the conditions you don't want. And like, again, if you come back to that emotion of resentment, it's an unmet need, but sometimes we know what we need, but there's maybe something else going on, like we need to people please. We feel if we say no, people are going to feel worse. You know, there's so much stuff caught in it. So when you can dive into your emotions, and particularly I would say the emotions you notice you feel a lot, particularly the unpleasant ones. This is something we don't like, going into unpleasant emotions. When you don't look at your unpleasant emotions and start to delve into them safely, you know, sometimes it can, if we've got trauma, it can be something we need to sort of titrate and work with gently. But if you fail to attend to your unpleasant emotions, they literally will get bigger. They will get more badass. I think I've said to you before, they go to the gym and they lift weights. And that's actually called what psychologists call amplification. So we all want to be more happy. I like to not actually think of happy as an emotion anymore. It's interesting. If you look at Sanskrit, you know, when you do your yoga teacher training, you learn Sanskrit, and happy is often translated into the word, is it sukha, I think, which actually means, when it's the actual translation, is a space, is like a good space. And I think if you think of happiness as a good space in your life, you're not always feeling happy all the time, but you've just got a more pleasant emotions and you feel like you're working with things with resilience, but unpleasant emotions will be there. If we don't turn into those unpleasant emotions, look at the intelligence behind them and ask ourselves what we need, they're literally unprocessed. They will just keep coming up and get bigger and bigger and bigger. So it is about really looking at what's coming up for you on the regular in terms of those unpleasant emotions, and then also starting to really look at mindfully around what's the way I want to feel,
Yeah.
and how am I doing something to actually really support myself to feel that way.
Yeah. Well, I'm so glad you just mentioned that, because that was going to be my next question is, what happens if we don't deal with the emotions or face them? And it sounds like we eventually are going to have to. Like they will keep showing up until we can no longer ignore them. Is that the case?
Yeah, 100%.
Okay.
But they grow legs and
Yeah.
arms, muscles, and they bring nunchucks and all sorts of instruments that just beat you around.
Yeah.
100%. It's interesting because there's a lot of trauma has been spoken about more and more.
Mhm.
If you look at actually the studies on trauma, and these are studies from pre-COVID actually, they said like 92% of people will have been exposed to trauma at some point in their life. I believe it's higher now, because I think we often think of trauma as being like really like big things that happen to us, but actually you can just witness trauma, or it can be things that you might not think are traumatic.
Mhm.
But really, in a way, like little micro traumas are going on all the time when we feel something real, or we fail to feel, but we have an emotion there that is a very unpleasant emotion that's there to tell us something. We turn away from it, we suck it down, we don't look at it. It's rumbling and rumbling and rumbling. It stores in the body. And so, you know, this goes on. If you don't actually, trauma is lots of unpleasant, really big, challenging emotions that have never had an opportunity to be processed in that moment, because maybe it wasn't safe to do it. Maybe you didn't even know what it was. Maybe it's just too hard to feel it.
Yeah.
So in a way, my belief is every time you suck it down and keep sucking it down and keep sucking it down, you are then in a way in trauma,
Yeah.
that you are causing more and more trauma to your whole being.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And I would be interested to see post pandemic, like what that number is, because I feel like I feel like we're dealing with the fallout of that, and people don't really realize what an impact that had on us, our kids, everyone.
Yeah. And it's remembering that an emotion is a whole body physiological event. So there's when I do these presentations on emotions, I pull up this slide, which is from some research from some Finnish scientists that looked at emotions where they appear in the body. So people put in an MRI, it's kind of like a color map of the body. And so you can see really clearly what lights up. So for example, rage, the whole head is on fire. Love, the heart sort of lights up. Depression, everything's just like this dark blue, which means there's no energy there, which makes sense because depression is almost this inability to feel anything. It's become so bad. And then the one that I find really interesting is disgust, because disgust lights out up at the mouth and then comes down to here to your just sort of your gut, your stomach. And if you think about what the actual emotion of a disgust is meant to do, it's meant to make you purge. Like something has happened to make you sort of almost vomit. So they are whole body experiences. So when we don't allow ourselves to feel the emotion, we therefore aren't processing it. And if you have something like fear, for example, say, I don't know, fear as a primal emotion thousands of years ago would have been you were being chased by a tiger. So you probably would have run like hell for your life. You would have breathed and panted. You'd have finally got to safety and hugged one of your people, that sort of physical touch. And that whole process would have been actually, you know, processing and feeling that emotion and going through it. But we don't give ourselves the opportunity to do that. So that's another reason why acknowledging the emotion is there, seeing what it's telling you, and then going through some kind of process to actually digest it is really important.
Yeah. Yeah, what book is it? It's by the Nagoski sisters, and they talk about this, like closing the stress loop.
Yeah. And I think it's the burnout book they wrote.
Yeah, I was like, I know it's not Come As You Are. That's a different topic. Yeah, the burnout book.
That's a completely different topic.
But also you should read it.
Kind of emotions. Yeah. They have one of my favorite quotes around emotions, which are emotions are like tunnels. You have to go through them to get to the light at the other side.
Oh, it's so good.
Yeah. Yeah. And so that's the thing, you've got to go through it. And that's not pleasant. And I think our inability to be with discomfort
Mhm.
is a lot of what actually makes us feel worse. And you talked about since COVID, I like people, because they've had so much crap, it's been a crap fest, right?
Yeah,
So
totally.
the ability to be with discomfort, I think that tolerance has gone down. In again, in the trauma world, they call that your window of tolerance.
Mm-hmm.
Smaller your window of tolerance, the smaller your resilience. So
Yeah.
you're what you're wanting to do as you start to kind of titrate into these unpleasant emotions is it's helping you build your window of tolerance to work with them and understand what you need to do to process them.
Well, so that's like the perfect segue to talking about how do I want to feel. So this is something I've been working on too. Correct me if I'm wrong, but this is kind of what I recently was reminded of. So our ability to feel the good stuff also impacts our ability to feel the bad stuff. So if we don't let ourselves feel good, then we're just blocking off, we're shortening that window of tolerance. So we got to build up the good stuff also,
Yeah.
so we can tolerate the not so good stuff, the bad stuff.
100%, which is why we need to feel our
Yeah.
emotions. So, and we need to be quite active about this.
Yeah.
So that it's a practice. So, for example, like I've got a retreat coming up called the Pillars of Joy, and
Oh,
I run a couple of retreats every year, sort of mindfulness retreats. But I decided to run this one around joy because I was noticing that, with normal mindfulness retreats, you are like sitting with your discomfort, which is very useful. But I felt like people have forgotten how to experience joy, and that joy is a practice.
mhm.
And part of that is like knowing when to savor good moments, like looking for the glimmers. Like if you were to go out, so if I was to go from my house here for a 10-minute walk and really pay attention to what could I see that's beautiful, there will be so much stuff actually that I'll see that is beautiful. It could be the color of the sky. It could be the shape of leaves. It could be, I don't know, some dogs playing on the beach or something like that. But if I pay attention to really open my filters up to what is, something that is beautiful and pleasant,
Yeah.
I'm more likely to see it. We have to actively choose every day. This is why gratitude practices work.
Yeah.
You're almost getting these pathways in your brain to start to be more observant of the pleasant, because our mind is already set up to be very set up to notice the negative, 5 times more likely to see the negative. Rick Hansen has this phrase of your brain is like Teflon for positive experiences and like Velcro for negative experiences. But the beautiful thing about the brain that we forget is that it's completely pliable. You
Yep.
can change the brain, but
Yes.
you can't change the brain passively. You
No.
have to do something differently. So I've written a gratitude journal every night since COVID without
Mhm.
fail. And the world is a hard place,
Yeah.
but we have to actively practice
Mhm.
and notice the pleasant things, of which there's probably way more. I talk about you talk about rose tinted spectacles. I
Mhm.
was like, but rather with default to poop tinted
Yes.
spectacles. So what you want to do is think that you still need to be observant of the unpleasant, not ignore it. But you have one lens that's rose tinted, one lens that's poop tinted.
So great. Yes, it was probably a month ago. And I was just driving out of my neighborhood and I saw a dad with his young daughter, young to where she couldn't walk. He was carrying her like to check the mail. And I see this little girl and she's in awe of everything. She's pointing at the leaves. She's smiling. She's looking at everything like it's the most beautiful thing in the world. And it is. Like we just have both poo lenses in. We need one of those rose lenses.
Yeah. And it's just I just notice it's very subtle, very, very subtle. Because I think it's not like you wake up one day with starbursts of unicorn and rainbows coming out of your head. But what you notice is little glimmers of things. That was what was really profound to me. I go on a walk, and like the other day I was out on a walk, and there's this, I don't know if you get them in America, but there's these birds called fantails. They're so beautiful. And they're like these little birds with literally a fantail. And I was walking through the bush and there was this little fantail. And it's like it wanted to engage with me. So I stood there and it was just like fluttering around. And I was just talking to it and looking at it. And it just in that moment gave me so much joy to just, I felt like, I mean, it probably didn't know what the hell I was and was like going, get off my path. But to me, I felt like it was wanting to connect and engage.
Yeah.
And that's not huge. I mean, we think that we need to go big places for those little moments of joy that help our resilience. And we try to find them on online shopping
Yeah.
or on binge watching Netflix. Or doing lots of expensive things. I call this hedonistic reward. It's short-term reward to make you feel good in the moment. But actually, it's the small, simple, normally free things that are the ones that really fill our cup.
Yeah, I agree. Oh, that's so great. Do you find that, speaking of these more positive emotions, so when you ask someone, how do I want to feel?
Yeah.
What's the normal response? Like, do people look at you like a deer in the headlights, or I don't know, what happens?
So going back to what you were saying about when you think of emotions, you could kind of name glad, mad, and sad. And if you've read the book Atlas of the Heart by Brené Brown, she talks about, I think she researched this with around 10,000 people to say, like, what are the emotions that they noticed feeling or felt the most? And they came back with happy, mad, and sad. And these are what's called meta emotions. Like I say, even happiness, I kind of refer to more as like a space or more of a state in a space. But actually, there's so many more. And it's important that you get to the nub of what's actually there, like the granular nub of what's there, because then you get the intelligence out of it. So if I was to ask people like how do you want to feel to thrive in your life? How do you need to feel? This is one I ask a lot actually when I go into workplaces. How do you need to feel to be successful in your role? How do you need to feel to be successful in this relationship? How do you need to feel over the next 3 months of challenge to help you get through it and be resourced to get through it? So the question that you ask might be to do with the context. But whatever the question is, it comes down to, how do you need to feel to be able to navigate whatever this is? If I was just to ask people randomly, most people would probably come back with that happy, mad, and sad because we don't necessarily have the language around our emotions. Having the language that goes with your emotions is called emotional literacy. We might have heard of emotional granularity. And this is really important because, again, you're getting down to what is it that's there that needs to be known? What is it that I need to know? How can I use this information to help me move forward? It's like that deeper insight. And so to enable people to really get to that granularity, have that language, because otherwise it's like you're having a whole conversation and you're giving people 5 words to have a conversation, but you need to have a vocabulary to have a proper conversation. So I use tools to do that. One of the tools I use, and when I know I've done some online stuff with your community, is the Emotional Culture Deck, which you can download for free. If people did want to buy one, I've got one here, which I'll show for people that are watching the video. So these are cards simply that have a whole load of emotions. They're not all of the emotions, but they're a lot more. So somebody might use a tool like that. Other tools that you can use are the Feelings Wheel by Gloria Wilcox. You can look that up online, or the Mood Meter by Dr. Mark Brackett. He is head of emotional intelligence at Yale University. So they're tools that you can use. You can look them up online. And what they'll do is they'll give you this wider vocabulary. And when you give those to people, often they will not come back with happy, mad, and sad anymore. They will look more deeply into how they need to feel. So like this year, at the start of the year, I asked myself, how do I need to feel? Because I'm about to write this book, which is big and scary. So, I was thinking like things like inspired, or to feel appreciated. And there was all different ones that were in there that were important for me. But I also asked myself the question, and this is really important, is how do I not want to feel, but I think that I might? Because it's totally unrealistic to just believe that you're only going to feel those pleasant feelings. And so by doing that, it gets me to be resourced and reflective on how I can navigate those unpleasant emotions in a better way with more ease. So ones that came up for me were impatient. It's a long process. Diminished. Doubt, which is probably the one I'm noticing the most. But because I kind of reflected on that at the start, it's been so much more helpful when I'm like, oh, here you are, doubt.
Oh,
I knew
thanks.
you were going to come along.
Yeah.
And there you are. I'm not going to let you stop me, but I knew that you were going to come along. So it can be really helpful to like actually be able to think about intentionally what you may not want to feel, but you think of, I call them the usual suspects of funky feels. So you can be intentional about how you resource yourself rather than reactive when they
Yeah.
come up.
I love that because it feels kind of to me like, gotcha. Like I knew you're gonna be here, but I'm not gonna let you do that thing that you always do.
Yeah. And all those unpleasant emotions, they're actually still there to be helpful.
Oh.
You know, that part of me that's got that self-doubt, which I think actually at the moment, I'm probably feeling it several times a day. I see you, girl. I know you're there. I know what you're trying to do is probably you think you're trying to protect me from falling flat on my face. But and thank you for giving me that information. And actually just almost like thinking of them as like another persona. If you've ever done parts work, they see them as parts of you. That's enough to kind of let them kind of, it's like whack-a-mole, isn't it? Let them go back down again until
Yes.
they come up again. And then if you're really looking out for those moments where you will feel those more pleasant emotions, you're seeing more of those glimmers, you're noticing that as well because you've been intentional about thinking about that at the front and also thinking about what things you can put in place actively, because again, it's important we're not passive, to set yourself up to feel those.
Yeah. Oh, I love this. So the last thing I want to ask you about is overly identifying with emotions. You
Yeah.
were talking about this on your Instagram the other day. So can you just talk about what that means when we overly identify with our emotions?
Yeah, and I think you, when we were conversing before, you talked about states versus states of being or something like that, wasn't it? So this is when you look at, again, an emotion, that kind of response to your environment or your thoughts that comes up. The thing about it is that it's like the weather. It comes and it goes. If you've ever read the poem Guest House by Rumi, he talks about them being like visitors. And so they're not permanent residents. You might feel at the time when they're there, they're like decided they've got squatters' rights and they're not going to leave. But actually, that initial energy of an emotion is only felt for seconds, like up to 90 seconds. So even being able to ride those 90 seconds out can stop that impulsive reaction. So when we overly identify is when, for example, there's an emotion maybe we feel a lot, like anxiety, I think is a big one, particularly for our times. Overwhelm is another.
Yeah.
Language really matters, right? And so if you say, I am overwhelmed, I am anxious, you are identifying as that is part of your identity and persona. Rather say, I feel anxious, I feel overwhelmed. Think of your emotions like a weather pattern that's like coming through and then it's going to leave. Some weather patterns last a bit longer. Some are more tumultuous and stormy. You need to kind of be prepared for the weather, I like to say, which is why it's good to think about how you might feel. So you're resourcing yourself for it. But just think of it being these impermanent states and fluctuations that come and go. And a thing that gets us into a lot of trouble is we either try to cling to pleasant states, which, actually the more you chase happiness, the research shows, the more likely you are to not be happy or not feel those pleasant emotions. Or we try to completely do whatever we can to avoid any of those unpleasant, which actually, again, it's like they will still be there and they need to be known and they need to be worked through. But something else just that links to that, because I've talked about emotions and feelings, you also will have heard of moods, states and traits. And this is what is quite powerful is, like emotions come and they go. Moods hang around a bit longer. Think of it as like a weather front, it's like, that weather front is here for a few days. And so that tends to be mood. So it's like more of the climate of feelings that are coming up over a period of time. If you then kind of overly identified with that mood, it becomes a state. It's like, I don't know, my overall state is that because I overly identify being anxious, I've made my world smaller. I'm always worried about trying to avoid being any more anxious than I already am. It becomes a mood, it becomes a state that can then become a trait almost.
Yeah.
So it's so powerful how you work with these on a micro level to then change your whole experience of life and how you show up on a macro level, on a more, longer term lifestyle level. Does
It's
that
like,
make sense as I
it
explain?
makes total sense because it's like you are deciding who you are.
You are. It's so unbelievably powerful. You hear about these things like, the power of manifestation. You think, oh, that sounds a bit woo. But if you translate it into just on a day-to-day basis,
Mhm.
what emotions are you working with? How are you identifying with those emotions? Something that I have noticed in myself, but also I work with my husband. I'm just that type of person. I'm the type of person who, and the more we tell ourselves, the more we're actually, this is why we find it hard to change, right? And if you link to some of the things with people, women in terms of their body image, their ability to thrive and be healthy, I'm the type of person who, I can't do that. This is really hard. Or actually, what they're saying on a day-to-day basis, they're creating their states and their traits. So you have to know you work on small, little, granular things repetitively over time. You can change your traits and your states.
Mhm.
You can't change them on the big level. You have to start on that small emotions, feelings, moods.
It's so powerful and so important. And like, if anyone is having a hard time grasping that, think about anyone, they use the term like glow up. Like people who have the glow up, that's an intentional thing. You see someone really transform before your eyes. This is what they're doing.
Yeah. I, if anybody listened to this knew the Lottie of 10, 15 years
Oh my
ago, and
God,
I
yeah.
talked about, I'm very, very different now in the core of myself, because I was writing about this yesterday with the book. I was saying, like, because it's all about emotional adulting, and I was saying, like, as adults, we kind of really, we're big kids with more bills, challenges, problems, longer to-do lists. But actually that essence of who you are inside, it kind of never really changes, but it's the way you show up for yourself that can kind of change, and like there's thoughts and emotions. So if I look back to the Lottie of 10, 15 years ago, I was highly reactive. I was emotional in a way that the emotionals were there, but I wasn't really allowing myself to feel them or really look into the intelligence of them. But also in terms of, we talk again about the stuff that you really are passionate about working with, is like body image, is women feeling good in themselves, like actually how you feel in yourself is like so important. I would have probably been leaner. I was younger. I had less wrinkles, but I didn't like myself.
Right?
And that manifested in, and I was also that kind of try hard, that manifested in how I turned up. I was also very fear-based. I was quite reactive, hyper vigilant, all of that. Over time, working on all of this beliefs I have about myself, this need for perfectionism that's unrealistic, working on all of that day to day, embracing the parts about myself that maybe I didn't like and starting to love them, accepting myself, befriending myself. I feel so much better. In some ways, I feel the best I've felt in myself and my body in my whole life. And my body doesn't look as good, maybe, but I love it. And that has all been through working on these emotions that come up, looking at the thought patterns, looking at what some of these are trying to tell me, and then really connecting into that inner Lottie, that home base of me that's no different from when I was 10.
Yeah.
Um, all of those things do make a difference, but they're not a quick fix.
No,
And I think in the whole industry around body transformation and self-help, we want to think
oh,
quick. No such thing.
no such thing. I know. I'm kind of over most things right now. You got to stick with the people that like you. I'm very choosy with who I give my attention to and all of that stuff. But I have this theory. Maybe it's not my own theory. But it's like, yeah, we're kids and that's our essence. It's who we are. We don't know any different. And then, we have some life experience and then we do the best we can to deal with it. And we turn into that try hard perfectionist, people pleaser person. But then we like reach midlife and you realize that's not who you want to be. Those aren't the emotions you want to feel. So it's like you're coming home to yourself. Maybe that's why we don't feel like we're adults, Lottie. Like,
But I think what I mean, so the book is called Emotional Adulting. It's probably not going to be out for another year or two.
Yeah,
We
no
just
pressure.
started it. So, but literally that was my whole reason for writing the book, is that most people still really feel quite connected to that child inside, which really, even just giving it the label of a child is misleading. It's just the essence of you, your home base of who you are, without all the baggage and experiences and beliefs and conditioning and all of that put on the top. But the thing is, this feeling like, oh, I'm an adult. I don't feel like an adult. And I've got all these things I've got to navigate. And maybe it's me. Maybe I'm failing, because everyone else out there looks like they're doing adulting just fine, especially because I'm like going through my Instagram feed and they're showing me like motherhood looks bliss. And, I've got this perfect six pack, and look at my perfect diet that I have for morning, all these things that you see that people seem to actually really love following on Instagram. They don't show you they're showing you just the rosy tinted. They're not showing you any of the poop tinted that makes your tinted glasses go bigger. So it's not, it makes us kind of feel bad. So with the adulting, I was like, actually, we're not taught at school how to be an adult. Nobody's taught us how to be an adult. And actually, being an adult is highly emotional. We're told that you shouldn't really feel your emotions. They just get in the way. You're going to make way crapper choices if you get all emotional about it. And so I wanted this book to be about like the emotions of riding the emotions of being an adult, knowing how to navigate them with more ease. So because it's all the stuff we should have been taught at school, but we weren't. We were taught, I don't know, algebra and all this other stuff that is in no way useful for us being an adult.
Nope.
I'm not saying, for those that love algebra, I'm not saying that that's a terrible thing to learn, but wouldn't it have been useful if we'd have learned a lot of the stuff to prepare us for this shit show that we find ourselves in a lot of the time?
Absolutely. This is a big deal. It's a very big deal.
Yeah.
I mean, I do think there is a little bit of hope now. I know my son has they have a social emotional learning or whatever it's called. And I love that. Like he's came home and he showed me the breathing thing where you inhale up your finger, exhale down, inhale up, exhale down. I'm like, I love that. I love that Miss Peters taught you that. That's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. That is it, and it's great that they're bringing it in. And I work a lot with my kids with emotions as well. But I think it's interesting because I Googled, or I went on the Oxford Dictionary to say, like, what's the definition of emotional and what's the definition of adulting? Because I've kind of coined this phrase of emotional adulting, and I wanted to kind of see what it said. And when it looks at adulting, it says something like experiencing like the experience as an adult of the mundane and day-to-day stuff or something like that. And I was like, if you told that to a kid, like, this is your future, they'd be like, no, thank you. I'm going to Netherlands. I'm going to stay a kid forever.
Absolutely.
And all of that emotional stuff is really still is great, but it's in the context of being a child. And then you look at emotional is like seen, we see it as a bad thing often. That's how we've been taught. Like my dad used to say to me, don't be so emotional, take emotions out of the decision, keep your emotions in check, all of these things. So we become adults and we have all these emotions. We think that it's us failing and we're not doing life right, because again, everyone else seems to be doing it really well. And we're not resourced to be with that difficulty and know how to get through it. And that's why I wanted to kind of write about it, is to say, you're not alone. These are why your emotions are there, and then work through different life experiences that are seen as being, there was a book around life quakes. They seem to be like they're really huge seismic shifts that happen in your life as an adult, becoming a parent, getting married, getting divorced, losing a loved one, going through things like, for women, going through like menopause, all of these like big things that happen, financial stuff, work life, giving you ideas of how to navigate those, what to expect, so that you're more resourced to do it, so you can be more intentional about getting through it. Because I don't think we're talking about this stuff enough, but we're feeling it, or the emotions are there and we maybe don't even know how to feel them.
I mean, everything that we're all experiencing the same things. I mean, maybe not all of us get married and maybe not all of us have children, but we all have jobs. We all are getting older. We all are going to have aging parents, all of that stuff.
Mm.
We need to
Mm.
learn how to deal with life.
Yeah, and I mean, part of what, so for example, we're talking about things a lot more. So if you look at things like, I'm in that perimenopause phase, but I'm very fortunate to have people like yourself and it to be something that is talked quite widely about. Women have been going through menopause since women existed, but it's only now we're talking about it. So people would have gone through these big shifts in their physiology and in their mental and emotional state that were absolutely always going to happen, but they've no way prepared for it. Okay, no way. It's not talked about. You're going through it alone. The same with one of the things that we're facing at the moment is, aging parents. Again, something that you're not really prepared for as well. Like you hear more about looking after your children and supporting and like young families, which is really hard. But some people are doing both. They've got young families that they're trying to do the best to get by. They're trying to hold down a job to have financial stability. And then they've got aging parents they need to think about as well. So it's like bringing this to the conversation, not necessarily saying I've got all the answers, but part of the thing that helps is talking about it, reflecting on it, becoming self-aware it's there and doing some really simple little things. Because as you know, you supporting the women that you support helps them to feel better. A lot of it's coming from them, but they're just in a community where they feel safe, they can have a conversation, and they've just got some scaffolding around them to help them through.
And it's also so nice knowing that you're not the only one. You're not the crazy person experiencing these things.
Yeah,
I agree, Lottie.
absolutely.
Yeah, and it's like all of that stuff happens at once. Like everything you just said happens all at once.
All at once. And it's like nobody told us this. If we, it's about being prepared for the weather.
Yeah.
It's like there are gonna be, if you're trying to get through your life with no stormy weather, like I always think of Hawaii, it's always 28 degrees and sunny whenever I look at my weather map in Hawaii, although they still have storms too. But like if you're trying to go through your life in the Hawaiian climate, it's not realistic.
No, it's not realistic.
And so how do you prepare yourself for that? Something I think that causes us so much suffering is our inability to meet life as it is and try and stay in the illusion of how we think it should be, because it's not always going to turn up like that. So this is why I bring a lot of the work I do as a mindfulness teacher to it. It's like the premise of mindfulness is, they talk about the Four Noble Truths, which literally are everything changes all the time. Change is totally constant. Your inability to deal with that is what causes you suffering. There is a way to deal with it better. And this is the way, which is kind of these eightfold path of what they call mindfulness, but they're very practical things in terms of self-awareness, of compassion, really think about how you communicate with yourself and with others. They're very practical, simple things on a secular level that we don't necessarily do, but are not hard.
No. Oh, that's exciting. So Lottie, let's say, how do we get you to lead a retreat for us? How does that work?
Oh, you get me on that plane, I'll be there, honey. I would love it. I would love to come over. That would be awesome. But if you can't come on a retreat with me, there are some like little simple things you can do that, again, maybe be uncomfortable. I think the first is to start to get to really know what is the emotional climate that's coming up for you regularly. So starting to really be aware of what emotions are there, using a tool if you can, because that's going to help widen your emotional granularity. Start to really reflect on why those emotions that you notice might be there. What are they telling you? If you go, I don't know what this emotion's telling me, you can even, again, like Google it. Google like, what do these emotions mean? There's so much out there. If anyone's got ChatGPT, I mean, you'll be able to find some, but it will prompt some stuff for you. But remembering that the process of regularly inquiring into what emotions are there allows you to feel them. And then you start asking you're acknowledging them, start to ask yourself, how does that show up in my body? What do I notice? and then what would be helpful. There's a beautiful practice called RAIN by Tara Brach, which is an acronym for you recognize, and this is particularly helpful with difficult emotions. Recognize the emotion is there, which gives you the opportunity to then feel it. And the A is allowing it to be there. In that moment, just maybe write it out for a minute or two. The I is identify, like investigate and identify what's there. So you kind of say, well, I feel it in my anxiety is like a weight in my chest. I notice other thoughts are coming up as a result of this. These are my impulses. And then the N is nurture, what's helpful for you to do that would nurture yourself in this moment.
Awesome. Well, this is wonderful, Lottie. Thank you so much. Where is the best place to find you? Should we look for you on socials? Should we go to your website, sign up for emails or anything? What do you?
All of the above. So my website is mindyou.co.nz. So that's mindu.co.nz. I am actually, weirdly enough, I'm most active on LinkedIn.
Oh yeah, great.
So I'm on there, Lottie Roberts, but also I am on Instagram. So again, Lottie Roberts. So you can follow me there. I'm often putting bits and bobs around emotions and the stuff I do. I only have just one Instagram page. I don't have like a separate one for my business. So just be aware, if you do follow me, you're going to get some spam on proud mum moments and the whole of me.
And maybe some flash mob moments, some dancing.
Oh yeah, that was my so going back to how powerful it is to be intentional about your emotions. At the start of the year, my word for the year, my emotion that I wanted to feel more of was daring. Because I'm 51 now, and I noticed like these little things of how I just get a little bit more introverted and not putting myself out there, and life can get smaller. So it's like, this is a year of me being more daring. So one of the things that I did to help myself be more daring was one of the things that brings me joy is dancing. I started dancing last year, Saturday, Shut Up and Dance, which you can also follow on Instagram. And it's just, you like go turn up. They go, right, today we're going to do, I don't know, Lady Gaga or Dua Lipa, and you learn a routine, you do it, you go home. But they do a big sort of performance at this sort of arts street fair called Cuba Duper. And so they were looking for volunteers to do a troupe. And I volunteered, and we performed in public in front of like thousands of people. It's great. It's like all shapes and sizes, all ages. We just danced our butts off for 7 minutes, and it felt amazing. It felt so amazing, scary, daring, but amazing. So
I love that. I started taking some like dance classes last year. I'm not doing it right now, but I loved it for that very reason. Seeing all different shapes and sizes and women moving confidently in their bodies, seeming to have no concern for the way that they looked, and they just would move in such a beautiful way, sensual, athletic, whatever the word. And it was just like, I was like, this is what will save the world. Dancing will save the world.
Yeah, it's and actually just on a physiological kind of level, to be able to process your emotions, movement and dance is actually really powerful to kind of get sort of process and digest all those unpleasant emotions that need movement to get them out. Particularly, I find like if you have like a low energy unpleasant emotion, so something like apathy, these, you can tell they've all got the mood meter that I talked about from Mark Brackett. He talks about emotions being pleasant to unpleasant, high energy to low energy. So there's those unpleasant, low energy. They don't have energy in themselves. Like anger's high energy, unpleasant. So that's got anger, that's got movement they can push through. And it's quite an active emotion, but low energy, unpleasant emotions don't. So they need movement to like push them through. So that's why people languish. That languishing kind of feeling is all those low energy, unpleasant emotions where you just lie on the couch. I don't know, again, there's nothing wrong with watching Netflix, but when you're like watching it for ages and you're just feeling worse because you've sat there for hours, you've not got any sleep because you keep going next episode, next episode. And it's like you need movement and big energy to push those through. So dance can be very, very helpful to do that. And you don't have to be amazing. Like I am definitely not the best dancer, but in my head, I am grooving it. I am there.
That's all that matters. If you believe it, it's true. That's what I say.
Exactly. And one of the things that Claire, who does this classes, she's awesome. She says, I know I've sworn once and I hope it's okay. But she goes, just remember, you're allowed to be shit. You're allowed to be shit. And it's like, I think we need to remember that in life.
Yes.
We're allowed to be shit at things. It's
Yes.
part of what helps you to get, you have to go through a process of actually being shit at something to be good at something.
Yeah.
So I love that. I say that in myself. It's like, it's just about expression and
Yeah.
I'm allowed to be shit.
Awesome, Lottie. Well, I can't wait to do this again. Thank you so much for your time. Maybe when the book comes out, no pressure at all. We'll do this again, if not
Yeah.
before.
Yeah. That would be great. Yeah. And I always love talking to you. It's just a pleasure. Do get in touch if there's any questions that come through that you want help with.
Yes, I'll
And
have links to your stuff so they can reach out to you and connect. And it's the morning for you. It's Wednesday morning.
it's just 11:10. Wow, we've been talking for an hour. This is a long episode. Sorry about that.
Oh no, this is good stuff. This is what people need to know, but it blows my mind that you're across the world and we get to connect. That's one of the things that makes me so excited that I'm in awe of it.
Oh, it's amazing. I've met so many people. Talk about the dark side of social media a lot, but the good side is like connecting with people that you would not be able to connect with. And with your social media, you could actually go through the feed and start to notice what emotions come up. So you can notice the things on your feed that nourish you, that lift you, and then the ones that really aren't serving you because they trigger you and make you feel like crap every time. That's a little exercise people can do after this.
That's funny because that's actually a social media prompt that I was going to use this week talking about that scenario. So I love that we're on the same page. I'm not surprised.
I know. In sync, sister.
Yes, totally in sync. Well, have a wonderful day, Lottie, and I can't wait to talk to you again.
Can't wait to talk to you as well. Have a great day, everyone. See
You.
ya.
I'll see ya.
Bye.